Hello, children. Welcome to today's episode of Godly Kid. I'm so much excited to have you here. On today's episode, we will talk about the boy, the man, and the King David. Yes, David. Today, we are going to look at the life of David, as said earlier, and pick some lessons from this great man as kids. I am your storyteller, Joe Smith. Let's get started. David was born in Bethlehem in the land of Judah. He was the youngest of 7 sons, born to Jesse, his father. It is believed that David was a red-cheeked, had bright eyes, and was a very handsome young man. He used to tend to the sheep of his father, Jesse. So basically, David was almost always in the fields, looking after his father's flock. Whilst in the field, David encountered so many challenges that proved how brave the boy David was. And as kids, we are admonished to imitate this character of David. Now one day, as David was tending to the flock in the field, there came a very big lion. But guess what? David did not run. Because of how brave David was, he fought the lion and killed it, preventing it from harming the flock that had been entrusted into his care. On a different day, whilst David, as usual, was in the field with his flock, a bear showed up. This time around, it was a huge animal, bigger than the lion he had killed in the past. Oh no! What would David do? David again stood up, confronted the bear, fought it and killed it too. This shows how David diligently carried out his duty as a shepherd. Not only did he feed them, but also made sure they were not harmed. Now the people of Israel had recently anointed Saul as the first king of Israel. But Saul soon sinned and fell from divine grace. An evil spirit replaced the spirit of the Lord in Saul and began to torment him. Children, this is to tell us that whenever we sin, we make way for the devil to torment us. Therefore, it is never a good thing to sin. We should stay away from committing sin, else the devil will torment us. Let's continue. Now King Saul wanted to free himself from the torment, so his advisors suggested he brought in a skilled musician who would play for the king to ease his mind. One of the attendants present recommended David, whom he knew to be a skilled performer. Yes, David was also a very skillful musician who could sing and also play the lyre. So you see, David could do so many good things, and you are expected as a child of God to also do so many good things. David was then brought to King Saul, and as David began to play the lyre, the king started to feel at ease. At this time, the nation Israel was battling the Philistines. These Philistines had a very big man, a giant, at the war front, and so Israel was frightened and did not know what to do. One day, Jesse, the father of David, sent David to deliver some food to his brothers on the battlefield. After the delivery, David saw the giant Goliath and told King Saul he wanted to fight him. Remember, David had earlier fought a lion and a bear and had killed them. It is believed that Goliath was about 10 feet tall. Wow, that's one tall man. Day after day, Goliath will appear on the hill in the mornings and evenings to frighten the people of Israel with its words that came roaring down like thunder. Then young David, filled with courage, approached the giant with just a staff, a slingshot, and 5 stones. And with one shot, he slew the giant where he stood. He proceeded to cut off his head and presented it to King Saul. The Philistines, witnessing this event, fled in fear, and David was a national hero. Yay! David had killed Goliath. After this victory, King Saul now retained David in the palace permanently. Whilst in the palace, David made friends with Jonathan, the son of King Saul. They became very good friends, the kind of friends who we are admonished as children to make. Friends who will always encourage us to do good and will always assist us in times of difficulty. Now David got married to Saul's daughter, whose name was Michal, and literally became part of the royal family. As time went by, King Saul started to fear David because the Lord was granting David so much success in his battles. King Saul's fear was that one day he will be dethroned for David to become king, because David was becoming too powerful and famous. This led to a war between the two. King Saul wanted to kill David, so David fled from the palace. King Saul embarked on a quest to hunt down and kill David. There were 2 times during his hunt when King Saul was at mercy of David. And instead of taking advantage of the situation and killing the king, David spared his life, as he dared not to lay his hand upon God's anointed one. King Saul again went to war with the Philistines, but this time around, he was killed. And Jonathan, the best friend of David, was also killed. David, upon hearing the news, mourned the death of Saul and Jonathan and the defeat of Israel. After the death of King Saul, David returned to Israel and he was made the king. So David became the king of Israel. David led the people of Israel in so many battles, and the Lord kept giving him victory upon victory. He became very famous in the land. King David died at the age of 70, and his son Solomon became king. Children, I hope you enjoyed that story of David, a man who loved God so much and gave him so much reverence. And I believe you've learned a lot from the character David. Share what you've learned with siblings and friends and encourage them to also have these good characters of David. This brings us to the end of today's episode. Till we meet again on the next episode, I say shalom. Be a good child to your parents, your church, your school, and everyone. See you on the next episode. Bye-bye.